Hello, grade sixes. Today we have Caitlin's name on the wall here, and we have Caleb. Thank you to the two of them who sent in their homework as well as many other students. So remember, if you send in your homework every day, you might see your name up here. Today we are doing comparing fractions and decimals. So we're going to look at two different number lines on the board here. Okay, so this first number line in blue is measuring by 1/10, so you can see decimal 1, decimal 2, decimal 3, decimal 4, decimal 5, decimal 6, decimal 7, decimal 8, decimal 9, and 1. This whole thing is 1, and this is also 1 as well here. So the reason each of these marks is 1/10 or 0.1, it increases by 0.1 or by 1/10 each time, is because I have one whole thing and then I've split it up into 10 parts. Okay, now we can compare these decimal numbers with these fractions. So remember that decimals and fractions are just two different ways of expressing numbers. So this is also 1, it's the same size. This pink number line is the same size as the blue number line, and I've split this up into half, so we can see that half is the same as 0.5. 0.5 is half of 1. So 0.5 and 1/2 are the same number, and then I split between 0 and 1/2. I split that in half again, and I got 1/4. 1/4 falls right in between 0.2 and 0.3. Okay, and then if we look between 1/2 and a whole, halfway between is 3/4, and that fits right in between 7/10 and 8/10. So we can use these number lines to compare decimals and fractions, and if we know how to convert back and forth, then you can compare numbers no matter what form they're in. So using these two number lines, I'm going to put some questions up on the board here, and you can do this in your head or out loud at home as we go along, or if you wanted to write this down, you could. Okay, so let's try this. So 0.4 is what? 1/4. So 0.4, is that greater than 1/4 or less than 1/4? So if we find 4/10 up here and then we go down, well, that's bigger than 1/4, so that's greater than. Okay, then let's look at 4/10 is what? Then 1/2. So 4/10 is, how does that compare to 1/2? Well, that's less than 1/2, so we'll put LT, less than. 0.8 or 8/10 is what? 3/4. How do those compare? So 8/10 is, so let's go up here. We follow down, and that is slightly bigger than 3/4, so that's greater than GT. Okay, we have 0.2 or 2/10 is what? Then 1/4. So we'll find 2/10 and bring it down, and that is less than 1/4. So LT. Okay, look at E. 0.3 or 3/10 is what compared to 1/2? Maybe that's something you can do in your head without looking, but let's check it out. So 3/10 is here. Bring it down. Well, that's quite a bit smaller than 1/2, so that's less than. Okay, so that gives you a little example. So what about, let's try one more. 7/10. How does that compare to 3/4? So we find 7/10, bring it down, that's less than 3/4. So, okay. Okay, so now let's look at if we have a fraction and we want to change it into a decimal fraction, so a fraction that we could quickly change into a decimal number. Let's look at some of those problems. Okay, so let's just say we have. I'm gonna erase this part as well. Don't need that. what equivalent fraction could we change that into that has a denominator of 100? So what do? We think, well, 5 times what is 100? 5 times 20. So then we have to multiply the 2 by 20 as well. So whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top, so that it's an equivalent fraction. So 2 times 20, that's 40. And then how would we write that as a decimal? So that would be 0.40. Now, do we need that 0 at the end? Not really. That's correct, but we don't need to do that. So we could also just put 0.4, so 4/10. Because remember, 40 out of 100 is the same as 4 out of 10. Those are equivalent fractions. Okay, what about 3/5? So what does that equal over 100? So it's the same ratio. Again, we're going to multiply by 5. So 3 times 5, that will be, or sorry, not by 5. We're multiplying by 20. So 3 times 20 is going to be 60. And then that decimal will be 0.6. And again, we could put the 0 here if we wanted to, but there's no need. So, okay, and let's look at 4/5. What's that as an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100? So we'll multiply by 20 again. 4 times 20 this time will be 80. 0.8. Okay. Now let's try one more set of problems here, and then I'll tell you what we have for homework. Okay, so let's say we had 2 over 20, and you wanted to write that as a decimal. So first, you would change that to something over 10 or something over 100. So let's go with 100. So 20 times 5 will be 100. So 2 times 5 is 10. And then how do we write that as a decimal? So that will be 0.10 or 0.1. So those are the same numbers. Just like we could add a whole bunch of zeros to this, couldn't we? And that wouldn't really change the answer because of this decimal. Okay, 3 over 20. Let's make an equivalent fraction over 100. So 20 times 5 is 100. 3 times 5 is 15. And then as a decimal, 0.15. And 4 over 20, times that by 5 again. 5 times 5 is 20. We get 0.2. Let's try one more. 5 over 20, equivalent fraction over 100. 5 times 5, 25. We have 0.25. Okay, so this is showing you how you can take a fraction, change it into a decimal fraction, so something that's over 10 or over 100 or over 1,000, and then you can change that very easily into a decimal. Okay, so I'll tell you what's for homework. Okay, so on page 11 to 12, you can do numbers 2 and number 8. So number 2 and number 8, and of course feel free to do both pages. You can do as many questions as you want to, but you do need to do number 2 and number 8, and you can send that to me today by email, and you can take a picture or you can type it out. Great, thanks.